Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for part 2 of our webinar series. My name is Siddharth Sharat Kumar, and I will be your host and presenter for today's session. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that everything is okay with the audio and you have no issues in viewing my shared screen. At any point of the webinar, if you face any technical glitches, do reach out to us on the live chat and our tech support team will try to fix the issues immediately. Right. I just want to get a couple of other housekeeping things out of the way. Firstly, we'll be sending you a recording of today's session via email, and we'll also be emailing you some resources that will help you get more details into what has been discussed and also give you some insights into ManageEngine's offerings for the solutions that we're going to discuss. Right. Apart from this, like I said, if you have any issues over the course of the webinar, do reach out to us on the live chat and we'll try to fix them immediately. And also try to interact with us. We've got our product experts here to answer your questions. So at any point in time, if you feel you want to discuss something in more detail, do reach out to us on the live chat. And depending on how it goes, we'll try to have a live Q&A at the end of the webinar as well. Right, so a recap of what we looked at in part 1 of the series. We looked mainly at preventive measures, right? In terms of being able to stop attacks even before they hit our network, right? So we had a look at some of the attacks in 2018 and what kinds of attacks we're seeing in 2019. We looked at UEM, the Unified Endpoint Management Solutions, and also looked at how we can implement some best practices with regards to privileged identity management, right? So those two are really important aspects of IT security, and we need those two things, as we're going to see over the course of the webinar. But the main thing that we are going to be focusing on today is detecting and responding to security incidents, right? So that's going to be the main topic of today's webinar, right? So we'll have a look at an overview of today's IT security landscape with regards to SIEM, right? With regards to security monitoring. And given that we're doing this webinar for Europe, I thought we'll also touch upon the GDPR and see exactly how security monitoring technology comes into the picture with regards to meeting some of the requirements of the GDPR, right? So we just have a look at that, the importance of SIEM when it comes to the GDPR and IT security in general. I'll also keep
audio voice break.
I'm just being told that we're having a bit of an audio issue. I hope
You don't talk. It's not good.
No, can you hear or not?
Your voice.
Dude, have you increased your volume?
It seems fine.
Increase your volume.
Is it coming up?
right. Sorry about that. We faced a small audio issue. I hope it's been fixed now. My sincere apologies for that. It's obviously an unforeseen thing. So just coming back to what we're going to be looking at in today's session, right? So in part 1, we looked at preventive steps rather. And today we're going to be looking at reactive measures, right? And both of these are going to be important for your cybersecurity strategy for 2019, right? Having that first layer of defense, which is your preventive solutions, having UEM and PIM in place, and then looking at layer 2 of your defense, which is where SIEM comes into the picture, right? So over the course of today's webinar, I want to give you a lot of examples, a lot of use cases, and best practices that you can take back, right? So even if you're not going to use ManageEngine SIEM solution, the material that we're going to cover in today's session will still be useful for you, right? We'll also give some focus to insider threats and how we can actually monitor and track evolving insider threats using a SIEM solution, right? And finally, we'll finish off by looking at some of the latest trends in SIEM, right? What kinds of technologies are being used and exactly why having those technologies as part of your security arsenal is important. Right. Let's start off by looking at what a data breach is. Right. So today I just thought we'd start off with the GDPR because this is so relevant for our audience today. Most of you are coming in from Europe and the UK. So let's start off by touching upon the GDPR. Right. So this was obviously a big regulation that came in earlier this year, and it's sort of like shaken up the IT security world, partly because no one seems to understand exactly what the GDPR is, and partly because some of the requirements are actually very specific in what they expect, meaning that a lot of revamp has to be done to your security strategy. Right. So one of the things that is very relevant with regards to today's webinar is data breach and breach reporting. Right. So if some of you are familiar with the GDPR, you'd know that you have to report data breaches within 72 hours. Right. So first of all, with the GDPR, we have to understand what a data breach is, right? Because in theory, when we think of data breach, we usually think of somebody coming in from the outside, maybe copying some data from our file server and walking away with it, right? But the GDPR extends the scope of a data breach. And you can see the definition that I have on the screen, and this is taken from the actual text, which says that a data breach is a breach of security leading to the destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure, or access to personal data, right? So you can see that it's not just data which is stolen, which is considered a data breach, but even just alteration, even unauthorized disclosure, right? It could be an unauthorized read of data, access to data. All of this still constitutes a personal data breach, right? So that's important to remember. And then you have a fact on the slide, and this is taken from Verizon's 2018 Data Breaches Investigations Report, which says that 68% of breaches took months or longer to discover. Right? Think about that. 2 in 3 data breaches took months or longer to discover, right? Amongst the breaches that Verizon investigated. So this is a problem because of what you see on the next slide, which is the article number 33, right? Article number 33, which says notification of a data breach. This is again taken right from the GDPR. I've not paraphrased or manipulated anything. And the GDPR expects you not later than 72 hours to notify the personal data breach to the authorities, right? And you also need to document personal data breaches with the facts, the effects, and the remedial action taken. So this is a really important thing to remember, because with the GDPR, there are a lot of things that we are still trying to figure out in terms of what you'll be audited for. But Article 33 is a good example of an explicit requirement from the GDPR, right? There's no nonsense here. It very clearly tells us that we have to report personal data breaches to the authorities within 72 hours, right? And reporting a data breach doesn't mean it's not just a notification, but it also has to be, there has to be documentation of the data breach, right? The actual individuals who are affected, the scale or the magnitude of the data breach, what personal records were affected, right? The effects, the remedial action. So it has to be a really comprehensive report that you furnish to the auditors. So with this in mind, in terms of developing a cybersecurity strategy, you need to look at 2 things. The first being able to detect a security threat in the first place. And second is to be able to investigate and respond to the security threat, right? So if you get breached, worst case scenario, you must be in a position to investigate exactly what happened and get all the details needed for the incident report. Right. So we come back to this to solving Article 33 using SIEM in a moment. But let's have a look at some of the challenges faced by security teams today. right? And these are challenges that are going to make it very difficult to meet the requirements of Article number 33 and in general to ensure IT security, right? One of them, of course, is cloud adoption. And this is something that we always talk about, right? It's always so much more difficult today to monitor networks than it was, say, 10 or 20 years ago, right? Because today everyone is on the cloud, everyone is using cloud applications. And this means that at some point, there is a chance that people in our organization will leave the premises of our office network, and it becomes difficult to track exactly what they're doing. Right? It's always easier to monitor your on-premise SQL server or your on-premise Windows file server. But it's obviously a lot more difficult to monitor something that we cannot see directly, right? Say actions performed on Azure, on AWS, on Office 365, or maybe on your Salesforce CRM or any other cloud application, right? So this is an area that is troubling security teams, because it becomes difficult to know if anything malicious is happening in the cloud, right? And it doesn't make sense to entirely trust the cloud application that you're using and just wash off responsibility by saying that, oh, it's being hosted by someone else, so I don't need to track anything, right? That's a problem. And then you've got new age attacks, such as like cutting edge ransomware, right? And we touched upon this in part 1 of the series. Ransomware, of course, is a huge problem now, so much so that ransomware protection has become an industry in itself inside IT security, right? So ransomware attacks have become so smart today. They're able to do things such as accessing Windows Credential Manager. They're able to map out IP addresses in the network that they can infect, and they're able to do that lateral movement a lot more effectively, right? This is a huge problem. Ransomware, it's created this industry of ransomware as a service, where any criminal who wants to carry out an attack without having much technical knowledge can procure these attack starter kits and carry out attacks, right? So it's become a lot more easier to launch large-scale cyber attacks today. And then you've got internal threats, right? 1 in 3 attacks last year were insider attacks, which means that you obviously have a problem if you're just going to be looking at mitigating attacks coming into your network, right? There are enough threats within your organization already, and that can be a difficult thing to track. Another challenge is caused by IoT, right? Again, because everyone is connected, everything is connected, it creates a much larger attack surface for any cyber criminal, right? So they have the means now to actually carry out attacks because of the technology that is available. And they also have a much larger attack surface because everyone today is using tablets, phones, everyone is connected, right? And everything is connected to your corporate network. So all of these things, along with new data protection regulations like the GDPR, these are the biggest challenges for security teams, right? This is what we recommend all of you to address going into 2019, right? I'm sure by now you have a lot of basic security measures in place, but now is the time to go one step further and think about how you can actually detect and mitigate some of the most recent cyber attacks, right? So how do we approach the problem? We know we've got a problem at hand. We've got all these new cyber attacks. We've got new compliance regulations in place. So how do we approach the problem, right? So just tying back to what we discussed in part 1 of the series, you first want to ensure that you're in a position to reduce the chance of being hit by an attack, right? Implement technical measures to reduce the chance of being breached. And this could entail some of the things that we already discussed, right? Identity management, patching, right? Other tried and tested security best practices. Make sure you do this because 90% of attacks can probably be prevented by just doing these age-old security best practices. Now, that once you've got that out of the way, you still need to look at incident detection and response, right? Because if preventive measures by themselves were enough, we wouldn't be hearing about attacks today now, would we? Because if it were the case that, oh, if patching is done, if identity management is done, if you have next-gen antivirus, that you wouldn't see any attack, then you wouldn't be reading about breaches in the news on a daily basis, right? So this is why layer 2 of your security defense becomes important, which is to be able to detect and respond to security threats. And that's what we're going to be covering for the rest of the webinar, right? We're going to be looking at SIEM, security information and event management, and we're going to look at how a SIEM solution is going to help you detect and respond to security threats. There's also part 3 or layer 3 to your security defense, which is steps to recover from an attack, right? Having your backup solutions in place, having your malware disinfection in place, things that you would turn to in case your first 2 layers of security fail, right? That is, in a worst case scenario, if your preventive solutions fail and if you're not able to detect and respond to the attack in time, so long as you have a reliable backup, you can still recover from an attack, right? So it's important to have a 3-fold approach to IT security, because that's the only way you can really be secure today, right? Attacks are so advanced that chances are you will inevitably be faced with something, and it's better to prepare with all 3 layers of security defense to truly ensure security as well as compliance. Right. So just to reiterate on why you need incident detection and response and why you need this monitoring technology, I have a simple scenario for you on the screen, right? Say John, who is an end user from your sales team, is added to the domain admins group in Active Directory, right? John, who's just a regular person in your office, gets added to domain admins. Let's not get into how this happens, right? But let's just assume that this happens. It could be a naive administrator who does this. It could be a malicious attempt. Either way, say this happened right now in your organization, right? And I'm saying this because all of you can relate to it. All of you have Active Directory. All of you have domain admins group. What if John is added to domain admins group? You obviously have a problem, because this would be a deviation from your security policy, because it creates an escalation of privileges, right? You don't want this to happen, because this is something that can result in non-compliance, right? Because John would then have access to everything in your network. So here is where your logs come into the picture, right? Windows, for example, in this case, your Windows security logs actually trigger different event IDs for group membership changes, right? You've got 4728, 4732, and 4756. So if you're tracking the occurrence of these event IDs in your domain controllers, you're essentially able to track group membership changes, and you're able to detect escalations of privileges that, like the one we saw on the previous slide, right? You don't want an unwarranted escalation of privileges. And the only way you can stay on top of such changes is by tracking your logs, right? You must audit your logs in real time. That's the only way you can detect scenarios like the one we just saw. Now, just to reiterate the importance of this change tracking, there is a preventive angle to this. If you use Active Directory, at a given point, you must have run reports to check who is part of which group, right? And you do that and you validate that and you think everything is all right until the next time you check it, right? But between 2 checks, things could change, right? Someone could be added to domain admins, and then by the time when it is for you to run your Active Directory report again, by that time, John could have been added to domain admins and then moved back to his original group, and you wouldn't know, right? So having this continuous change tracking is really important to ensure that your compliance and your security policies are implemented continuously and not just at the time of your audits, right? This is an important thing to remember, and I hope everyone now is on the same page on why we need the audit trail, right? We need the audit trail to know exactly what is going on in our network, exactly what events are happening, all the activities, all the changes, all the accesses. And the only way we can know that is if we stay on top of our logs, right? If you want to answer questions like the one you see on the screen, who is accessing and modifying your files and folders? You need to know this. This is a basic compliance requirement, and all the more important in the context of the GDPR, right? What about the files and folders that store personal data, for example? You need to know who is accessing and modifying your files and folders, because the GDPR expects you to maintain the integrity and confidentiality of personal data. And this is again explicitly stated, right? This if I'm right, this is article number 32. You need to stay on top of this. Stay on top of the 4 vital W's: the who, the when, the which, and the what, right? Who accessed a particular file, which file was accessed, when was the access made, and what was the if any modification was made, what was the changed value, right? This is basic, and you need to be able to do this. So if you don't have monitoring technologies in place, especially in the light of the GDPR, now would be a good time to turn your focus on log management and SIEM, right? A whole bunch of other use cases. You need the audit trail if you want to find out user account lockouts and the reason for the lockout, right? This is the example that we saw on the previous slide. Changes made to domain controllers, like group membership changes. Changes made to network devices. What if someone changed a firewall policy or a router configuration? Unusual activities. You've got databases, web servers, and other business critical applications. What if someone is carrying out an attack, right? What if someone is abusing privilege? SQL injection, cross-site scripting. Occurrences of all of these things can be tracked using your logs, right? So it's really important to stay on top of your machine generated logs, right? This is very important to layer 2 of your defense. This is to react and respond to security threats. Right, so I'm sure most of you agree with me that you by now that you need your logs, and you need to understand your logs in order to know what's happening in your network, right? So this brings me to the next question. What are my log sources? What are the machines from which I need to collect logs from? Well, there's no hard and fast answer to this, because it really depends on your environments, on your network bandwidth, even on the size of your security team. But here's what we normally see at ManageEngine for our clients, right? These are the most common log sources that we encounter. People obviously want to track their workstations because that's a good starting point for attacks, right? As we discussed in part 1, where we saw the importance of securing our endpoints. You obviously servers, that's pretty straightforward. You need to get your logs from your critical Windows or Linux servers. Your domain controllers, obviously your network devices are very important because traffic is passing through them. Your firewalls, routers, switches, IDS, IPS. If you've deployed endpoint security solutions, you want to bring logs from that as well. And then you've got your critical business applications, your databases and web servers, and your public cloud platforms, right? So we discussed this as a major challenge in IT security today, that we lose visibility once our users move to the cloud. But the good news is that your cloud applications and cloud infrastructures generate logs just in the same way that your on-premise applications would do. So you need to be able to get your logs from any public cloud platform that you're using, right? So keep this in mind in terms of what your log sources are. But in addition to those log sources, you may well have custom applications and some legacy systems as well. And getting logs from those systems will obviously help, right? So that you really know for every system in your network exactly what's going on there. So this brings me to the three crucial aspects of SIEM, right? And we're going to see examples and use cases for each of these things. So the first and foremost thing that SIEM gave to security administrators when it came into existence 10 or 12 years ago was reporting capability, right? Audit reports to review security events and demonstrate compliance. In fact, that was one of the major reasons why people were evaluating SIEM tools, right? So you want to ensure that you're able to do this. This is still very relevant today, right? Having reports to know exactly who's logging on to which machines, which files and folders are being accessed, what changes are being made in your Active Directory and other parts of your network. All of these things are still very important for compliance, right? A lot of regulations expect you to continuously review logs and security activity and generate reports, right? Because that's what your auditors want at the end of the day. I'm going to just show you a few examples in the next slide. So just hang in there for a couple of minutes. I just want to make sure that we get through the three crucial aspects of SIEM before actually showing you examples and use cases, right? So the second crucial aspect is alerts. So obviously reports are great to review and check security events, but you obviously need alerts for events of interest, right? So this means things like an account lockout or a group membership change. For these events, you need to set up alerts so that you get notified in real time when they occur, right? So these are what we call indicators of compromise, or IOCs, right? Which means that if this particular event happened, it could be an indicator that your network security is being compromised, right? IOCs. So you want to set up alerts for the common IOCs that are known. And then you can go one step further and leverage the new age technology in SIEM, which is event correlation and analytics, to detect and mitigate more advanced attacks, right? So today we have so many advanced challenges such as ransomware, crypto mining, and things like that. And you need an advanced, powerful correlation engine to associate logs from your different sources and make sense of different events happening in different sources in your network and give you real-time alerts for those as well, right? Real-time alerts for threats that are evolving in your network. Right, so at this point, I just want to introduce you to ManageEngine SIEM solution, right? I'm not going to spend more than a couple of minutes in talking about Log360, which is our SIEM solution. I just wanted to introduce you to the solution because while giving a couple of examples, I'm going to jump into the product to illustrate a point. At the end of the webinar, we'll send you a lot more material and you can evaluate the tool if you wish. But what Log360 is an integration of two of our ManageEngine tools, right? So Event Log Analyzer, which is a robust log management solution, and AD Audit Plus, which is a real-time Active Directory auditing tool, right? So Event Log Analyzer gives you insights into external threats, right? Threats that are coming into your organization. And AD Audit Plus brings in the internal threat perspective to help you track your Active Directory and keep insider threats under check, right? So these two tools together are integrated into Log360 so that you have complete visibility into the external as well as internal threats, right? I'm not going to spend more time talking about the solution. Like I said, if you have any product questions or you'd like to learn more about Log360, do send us messages on the live chat and we'll definitely answer them, if not now, at the end of the webinar, right? Just coming back to the actual material that we wanted to cover. And these are good takeaways for you immediately to try to implement in your organization, right? So here are a few examples of daily reports that we recommend to our customers to run, right? These are actual things that we have discussed with customers who have deployed our solutions, and these are the basic reports that we recommend our customers to schedule and have emailed to them on a daily basis. So first thing to do is you want to track your events based on severity, right? So as you know, logs have different criticality levels associated with them, and the first thing that you need to do is segregate the incoming logs based on their severity into reports, right? So you've got on Windows, you've got information, debug, critical, warning, and things like that. And you want to make sure that you are able to run reports for each of these severity levels, right? And a tool such as Log360 can do that for you automatically, right? Have these reports based on severity emailed to you so that you can check them on a daily basis and ensure that everything is up and running the way it should be. And in case you find something of interest, you can immediately go and investigate, right? So if you suddenly see a lot of critical events, that could be a sign for a potential breach, right? So you can go and check and review all your security events on a daily basis, right? Some more specific examples: you want to audit privileged user activities, the change, which is to say you want to track the changes made by your privileged users, your administrators. You want to check the changes made on Active Directory, your databases, your network devices. Your administrators are going to do a bunch of things every day, right? So make it a point to review all the actions that they made on the next day itself, right? And this is very crucial for compliance. A lot of compliance regulations expect you to track administrative actions on a daily basis, right? And then coming to firewalls, you want to track your firewall traffic, obviously, right? Based on the port, source, the destination, the type of traffic. It's very important to do this to stay on top of incoming and outgoing traffic in your network and ensure that they are from trusted and legitimate sources, right? You don't want malicious traffic to be interacting with your network. This is also a good way to find out if any threat is evolving, because you would find that if someone is trying to breach one of your servers, they may have their connection denied multiple times by a firewall, right? So track your accepted and denied firewall connections, track it based on the source, the port, the destination. All of these things can be done using a tool like Log360, right? Most good SIEM solutions in the market will give you pre-built reports to track common events of interest, right? Things like the firewall activity, and then you've got logon activity, right? Being able to track who is logging on to which machine, how long that logon was, fail logons, multiple fail logons, and a whole bunch of scenarios there just to do with logon activity, right? Again, very important for security, again, very important for compliance. And then you want to review your file, folder, and database activity, right? All the actions performed on your file folders, the accesses, the modifications, right? In fact, I have an example on the next slide, which is actually a screenshot from our product, right? So you can see that the report says all file and folder changes. So if you were to run this report on your file server, you will get details into all the files and folders that are deleted, renamed, moved, modified, and created, right? And using a good tool, you will get a bunch of granular reports as well, right? So maybe you just want to check the files that were modified or renamed or copy pasted, right? You might want to just look at failed attempts. You may want to look at permission changes. You may want to look at changes based on the users or servers or processes, right? So all of these granular reports give you a lot of details into exactly what's going on in your system, and in this case, your file server, right? So the reports come in a very neat human readable format, right? You can see different columns like the server, the file folder name, the location, the time of access, and a whole bunch of other things, right? Because this is what you want to do. You want to collect your raw log data and convert the logs into actionable information, right? You've got millions of logs probably coming in on a daily or weekly basis, depending on the size of your organization. And you want to be able to convert and visualize these logs in reports, right? Because this report gives you a clear understanding of what's going on. You know whether everything was legit and authorized, or if there is something that you need to further investigate. Right. Few other examples on what reports to schedule, right? Web server usage. You want to track exactly what's happening on your web server. Errors, the pages being accessed, the URL requests. You want to check if anything is malicious over that. And you've got, again, I'm just stressing on configuration changes. Again, something that a small change can potentially jeopardize the security policy of your organization. So you want to be able to track changes happening to different changes made to different configurations in your network. Right. So this is a crucial aspect of SIEM. Make sure you get this out of the way. Right. Make sure you are running reports and having them scheduled to be sent to your mailbox on a daily basis. Right? So this could be the first thing that you do once you come into work as part of your security operations. Come and review the logs that were generated in the previous 24 hours, check them and validate them in the report, and ensure that as of that point, your organization is secure. So while doing this, you may well find that something was anomalous and you can go and investigate, right? So in terms of actually implementing this, most tools such as ours will give you the flexibility to schedule the report to the designated email ID, and you can get this in PDF or CSV or whatever format you wish. Right. So remember to get this out of the way before moving on to the second crucial aspect, which is critical alerts. Right. Some of these events, security events, cannot wait until the next day to be reviewed. Right. You may have to investigate something immediately. Right. What if you have ransomware, for example? You can't wait till the next day and find out that your file server was encrypted. So in that context, having critical alerts for known indicators of compromise can go a long way in helping you to quickly detect security incidents. Right? So we know some of these things, and these are basic examples that we recommend to our customers. Right? Tracking unauthorized accesses, multiple logon failures, which could be a brute force attack, account lockouts, changes to group membership, changes to firewall policies, known attack patterns such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting. Make sure that your tool is tracking these things. Right? This is obviously not an exhaustive list, and there are so many other alerts that you could set up, but this is a crucial starting point. Right? Being able to set up alerts for some of these basic indicators of compromise. Right? Because this will put you in a position to really go and investigate and check if something is underway in your network. Right? Start off with these alerts. Even if you're not going to be using ManageEngine SIEM solution, with whatever monitoring tool that you're using, see if you can set up these alerts. Right? Because you can see by just looking at some of these things, say repeated server shutdowns. Right? What if one of your servers was repeatedly shut down or restarted? Right? That could mean that something malicious is underway. So make sure you set these alerts up. And then go one step further to event correlation. Right? So once you've got reports scheduled and once you've set up alerts to be triggered for indicators of compromise, then you can leverage the event correlation engine of your SIEM solution to detect more complex attack patterns. Right? Because most attacks are obviously going to have more than just one or two security events. Most attacks are going to have several security events happening one after the other. Right? You're going to have something, if you have a database compromise, there's going to be something that happened before and after that one particular log. Right? So if there is a SQL injection attack, for example, something might have happened before that on the firewall, something might have happened after that on a server. right? So to really get the full picture of an attack, to really know what's happening before and after a security incident, you need to be in a position to correlate logs from disjointed sources, right? Your VPN logs, your server logs, your web server logs, SQL logs, all of these things must be brought together to be able to detect some of these more advanced attacks, right? So you can see a few examples. Some types of logon attacks like brute force, suspicious software or services being installed on your servers, worm activity and lateral movement. All of these things have a chain of events that happen, right, when the attack takes place. So the best way for me to continue talking about event correlation would be to jump into the product. Let me just show you. I'm just going to jump into Event Log Analyzer, and I'm just going to show you exactly how we can track some of these more complex attack patterns. Right? So I'm just going to type out the URL demo.eventloganalyzer.com, and if any of you are interested in checking this out with me in real time, you can also access this URL, right? Demo.eventloganalyzer.com. This is a semi-functional online demo, right, which has a lot of simulated data that will sort of give you an basic insight into what kinds of things you can achieve with the product, right? And just log in and you'll see a whole bunch of dashboards and reports that give you a basic understanding of what we have to offer in our SIEM solution, right? I'm not going to waste my time going through every single report right now, but instead I want to show you an example of an attack that the product was actually able to detect with its correlation engine, right? So if you want to check this out, on the left pane, under potential Windows threats, you'll see suspicious services installed, right? And you can see that an alert has been triggered right here. And if you click on event timeline, you can see exactly what's happened, right? So this particular attack started off with in a Windows account logon failure at 1748, right? So it started off, there was this one account that failed to log on. Then it happened a few times. You can see that right here. And then the account successfully logged on, which over that itself it's a bit of a brute force kind of scenario. And then you can see what happens 1 minute later. A service is installed on the Windows machine. And then 1 minute later, the service is started, right? So between 1748 and 1751, a whole bunch of activities has happened on this particular Windows server. And the product's intelligence is able to associate these different events and trigger an alert for, in this case, an installation of suspicious the installation of a suspicious service, right? So between 1748 and 1751, the product is able to listen continuously for the next event that could potentially make it trigger an alert. And it gives you one alert at 1751 as opposed to triggering multiple alerts over the course of this particular attack pattern, right? So you want to eliminate the alert noise. You don't want to get 15 or 20 alerts within 3 minutes, right? That will just defeat the purpose of having a SIEM solution. So instead, you want to use and trust the product's correlation engine to detect patterns such as these and give you alerts only for events that you actually need to investigate, right? So you don't want too many false positives. And this is just one simple example. You can track that the same concept extends to all your other platforms, right? And if you want to explore what kinds of attacks a SIEM solution can help you mitigate, you can literally just look at some of these pre-built correlation rules that we have in the product, right? This will give you an idea on what kinds of problems you can actually solve. You can see web server threats, database threats, ransomware, file integrity threats, even cryptocurrency, right? Installations of crypto mining software, and spikes in CPU usage and things like that. So I just wanted to give you this example. I'm just going to jump back to the presentation. I wanted to give you this example to highlight the power of event correlation, right? And the necessity to have this as part of your security arsenal. So you can see how we were easily able to detect a complex attack pattern, right? It's not very hard because most of these correlation engines, including our own, are automatic, which means you don't have to keep going and defining multiple rules, right? You can obviously create your own rules and customize existing rules, but a lot of these correlation rules are just built into the product, which means when anytime when this kind of pattern takes place in your network, so long as you've activated the correlation module, you will be able to track these attack patterns, right? So stay on top of these three crucial aspects of SIEM. First being scheduling daily audit reports. The second being setting up basic alerts for indicators of compromise. And the third being leveraging correlation to detect more advanced attacks. So this brings me to the last bit of my presentation, and I'm going to talk a bit on the latest trends that we have seen in SIEM, right? One of the major things that has happened over the past few years is this stress on threat intelligence, right? Threat intelligence is obviously very crucial today because we know that there are so many known malicious actors out there, and it becomes very important to check if any of those known malicious actors are interacting with our network, right? Both in terms of inbound traffic and outgoing traffic. So what threat intelligence integrations do is that they are able to map your incoming and outgoing traffic by looking at your firewall logs and correlating it with the threat databases, right? And checking if any of these IP addresses are blacklisted or not. Right? So if you know that a blacklisted IP address is trying to interact with your network, you can immediately take steps to permanently block that IP address. So this is very similar to what we do in immigration in our airports. Right? When you go and hand over your passport, your immigration officer is essentially checking to see if your passport matches that of one of the known criminals in the world. Right? So the same thing extends to our network security as well. We know that there are a whole bunch of known malicious sources in the internet, and we can leverage this knowledge to detect blacklisted IP addresses even before they can enter our network. Right? So this is a crucial trend to keep in mind if you're evaluating a SIEM solution today. And then public cloud auditing, and we touched upon this earlier. Right? You want to make sure that your SIEM solution has the capability of monitoring logs from Office 365, Azure, AWS, and all of these other cloud platforms. Another big trend, of course, is correlation. We saw how powerful event correlation can be, and a lot of SIEM vendors, including ourselves, have been adding more advanced correlation rules to meet the growing demand, right? Growing demand of protection against some of these new age attacks. Another trend is that of the idea of a security operations center or an SOC, for which what people do is they have a distributed architecture when they deploy a solution, right? If you have, for example, offices across the globe, you can easily install managed servers in each of the locations, and then in the head office you can have your admin server that will manage all of these different managed servers, right? So this is an important trend in SIEM because especially with organizations scaling up, you may have to evaluate a distributed architecture for your deployment. And then the last two trends, right? And I'm going to just show that in separate slides because I just wanted to stress upon these two things. The first being UBA, or user behavior analytics, right? This is a very good example of how we can leverage some of the latest advancements in computer science and integrate those things into our security program as well, right? So machine learning is obviously a big thing today, and everyone is talking about that in tech. And what UBA does is it brings in machine learning to SIEM, right? It brings in machine learning to your security operations. And what a UBA tool can do is that it can profile your users and analyze their daily behaviors, right? So you can profile your users and understand how each of them behave, and if any of them show a deviation or an anomaly, it can raise an alert, right? This is very crucial to tackle insider threats. We know that insider threats are on the rise, and we know that we need to combat these evolving insider threats. And one way to do that is by looking at machine learning to give you alerts for when users do something suspicious, right? A lot of SIM solutions like our own come in with a built-in Yuba module, right? There are tools, dedicated Yuba tools out there as well, but you could look at a SIM solution such as ours, which comes in with a built-in Yuba module, right? So let me show you an example of what kind of threats a Yuba tool can actually detect for you, right? And these screenshots are alerts triggered by the AD Audit Plus component of Log 360, right? This is, like I said, this is a built-in thing, so it's unsupervised machine learning, which means that the product can act on its own and actually profile the users and give you these alerts without any configuration from your end, right? So you can see that what's happened in this particular attack is that the first an alert has been triggered at 126, where the activity type says first time host access by user, right? So the user Surya is accessing this particular host for the first time in his history, right? So that itself is a bit of a red flag, and the product knows that this user could be a potential security risk and closely monitors what actions he then performs, right? So the next thing which the product realizes is that the activity has been performed at an unusual hour, right? So it says here unusual activity hour between 1 to 2 a.m. And generally this user works from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Right? So this is the next red flag that the product has raised. And then on the file server, again, he usually works on the file server between 1 p.m. to 6 p.m., but this is happening somewhere in the night at 1:26 a.m. Right? So this is unusual activity based on the file activity time. And then finally, the alert based on an abnormal volume of events, right? So it says here unusual activity, file activity count. So this is to say that on a normal day, Surya does 0 actions on the file server, but suddenly has done 10, right? So all of these alerts put together will give you an idea that something suspicious is being done on your file server by this particular user, right? It started off with him accessing the host for the first time, the fact that he was logged on at an unusual hour, the fact that the file server access came in at an unusual hour, and also that he normally doesn't perform actions on the file server, but he's suddenly done 10 different things. So this is an important technology to leverage, right? Because just like event correlation, UBA is going to help you quickly detect threats, right? And this doesn't require configuration from your end. This is leveraging machine learning to do this kind of threat detection automatically. Now, having these two technologies, having event correlation and Yuba, is obviously going to help you quickly detect security incidents, right? It's going to help you quickly know when something malicious happens. Now, once you do that, you want to go one step further and quickly respond to the incident as well, right? And obviously just knowing that an alert is triggered is not enough. You need to resolve the alert. And for that, this is where the idea of security in orchestration and integrations comes into the picture, right? You want to have your SIM solution at the heart of your security operations. You want your SIM solution to be at the heart, and all of these other tools that you have can be integrated with your SIM solution, right? So this will ensure seamless security operations and incident response. So with regards to alerting, what you can do is you can have every alert raised as a ticket to the designated administrator, right? You may have a database administrator. So if you get a SQL injection attack, that can be raised as a ticket to the SQL administrator. And what this does is that it gives you accountability. You know exactly who's attending to and resolving alerts. It's also very crucial with regards to the GDPR because you have a 72-hour deadline to report the data breach. So with UBA and correlation, that detection becomes almost instant. And then with the ticketing integration, you're going to have really quick response, right? So as soon as a security incident is triggered in your organization, your SIEM solution is going to raise the alert, and that alert is going to be raised as a ticket to the administrator who can respond to the incident as soon as possible and report the incident to the auditors. Right? This is important. You need to have this mechanism in place so that you can show your GDPR auditors the remedial steps that were taken. Right? This is explicitly stated, and we saw that in article number 33. We saw that we have to report within 72 hours and also report with relevant details about the data breach. Right? So what you see here as KDB is the knowledge database, which is a good practice to maintain so that in case the same alert gets triggered at a later point, you are in a position to quickly know exactly how this alert was resolved the previous time, right? So keep this in mind. That's the main takeaway from today's webinar, right? You want to leverage a SIEM solution with the latest kinds of features so that with the correlation and UBA, you're able to quickly detect two incidents, and by integrating your SIEM solution with a centralized ticketing tool, you can streamline the response, right? So this is layer 2 of your security strategy for 2019. The first being your preventive measures, your PIM and your patching and your UEM. And the second layer being your SIEM solution, which is there for detecting and responding to security incidents, right? So focus on these two parts and you should be in good shape going into 2019 to tackle the GDPR and to tackle security in general, right? This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today and making this webinar a resounding success. Thank you so much for your interactions on the live chat. We've been answering most of your questions. And if your questions haven't yet been answered, just stay put for a couple of minutes and we should answer your questions immediately, right? Also, at the end of the webinar, do take a moment to fill up the feedback form to let us know what you liked or didn't like about today's session. If you have any suggestions for future webinars as well, do let us know on the live chat or in the feedback form, right? And what next is that we will send you a bunch of material that will help you build on what you've learned in this webinar series and also give you some details about the solutions that we have from ManageEngine, right? So in the feedback form, you'll have the option to schedule a demo if you'd like, right? So you can actually schedule a demo for any particular solution that you're looking for, and one of our technical consultants will get in touch with you shortly after, right? So once again, thank you so much for joining us today and have a great day ahead.